This has been a highly requested video of like, how did you get into running? And I've shared here and there on Instagram and TikTok, but I have never fully delved into my running story. And I think it is a really awesome reflection moment for me, but then also to be able to share tips in between is really fun. Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vicky. I'm a 25-year-old living in New York City and I share all things running and lifestyle. And today we are finally going to dive into my running journey, and in between this journey, I'm going to give you 10 tips on how you can start your running journey as a beginner from scratch and kind of just what I have learned since running for 4 years now. So we're going to dive right into it. We're going way back to the beginning of my childhood life where I was doing rec soccer. I was not good, and I was also doing cheerleading. And those two things were simply for fun and for social. I avoided running and honestly avoided exercise at all costs growing up. I didn't like it. I had the attitude of just like, I don't want to do that. When there was a mile time trial in high school or whenever, that was like the worst day of the year for me. And I was consistently upset over it, and I would try to fake sick to get out of the test. And it was just not for me. It wasn't something I enjoyed. And every single time that we had to run during cheer practice, I was like, this is punishment. So I never saw running as fun, which I don't think most people do. Bringing me to my first tip of, if you are looking to start your running journey, don't force it. If it is not something that you are enjoying after the first few tries or runs, you don't have to run. Like, I know that sounds crazy coming from a literal running content creator and somebody who loves running, but you really shouldn't force it, because if it is forced and if it is punishment, you are going to hate it and you're going to resent the sport, and then you're going to end up with a bunch of other problems along the way. So we're going to talk about how I actually found my way to enjoying running. Although did not like exercise, I was extremely competitive. I would like get upset over a board game with my family. I really just was competitive, and I still am. And my family and I decided to sign up for a Run Disney 5K that was happening in March of 2020. And you probably know where this is going. We all know what happened in March of 2020. I signed up for this with my family, and we were like, it's gonna be a fun thing to do. We can walk, run it. We grow up going to Disney. It'll be fun. So I started training for this 5K via the Couch to 5K plan, and then also in tandem using the Nike Run Club app, because at the time I was working or interning for Nike, and I was like, that is the only way I've ever thought about running was with Nike. So I immediately downloaded the Nike running app, bringing me to tip number 2 is to find some sort of entry-level training plan or at least schedule to get you going. If you want, you could just say, I'm just gonna try and run twice this week. I think that's great. But if you have like a goal set in mind of running a 5K, check out the Couch to 5K program, find a PDF online, like do a little bit of research there just to like get you started. I find that like having a schedule to follow makes things a little bit easier. And so I signed up for the Nike Running Club 5K plan, and then I was kind of looking at the Couch to 5K app, and I started getting really into it because I was so competitive. I didn't want to be the last one in my family to finish this 5K. And as I started checking off the box every single day or week of this plan, I was like, this is really satisfying. And every single run, I was like, I'm getting a little bit better. That run was a little bit easier than the last one. I don't feel as out of breath. I'm like starting to get into a groove. I like the way that I feel after this run. And it was kind of like slowly but surely things started falling into place in my brain, and I was not doing anything crazy. I think training for a 5K is an awesome distance to start because it's so achievable and it doesn't feel crazy. And for those that don't know, 5K is 3 miles. And at the time I couldn't run 1 mile. And I think I was also giving myself so much grace at the beginning because I had nothing to compare it to. I didn't know what the average time for a female runner's mile was. I didn't know how fast you were supposed to finish a 5K. I didn't care if I was walk running. I think I just had this really carefree mindset that I kind of miss, and I'm trying to get back that mindset a little bit. And I think it was a fun way to just kind of get into it. And then you kind of start getting a little bit addicted, and that kind of creeps into wanting to dive right in, which brings me to tip number 3. Do not, before you go out on your very first run, go out and buy a ton of things. In social media world, in running creator world, you're probably seeing XYZ products being pushed out, and a lot of them are awesome, and I use a lot of them. But when you're just getting started, all I had was a good pair of shoes and a very, very old Apple Watch, and I don't even think you need the watch at this point. You can use the Nike Run Club on your phone or Strava on your phone to track your runs, not even track the runs. It doesn't even matter at the beginning, and it doesn't matter now, but if you want something to be able to measure how far you're going, you can use the app on your phone. You don't need a wearable. The one thing you actually do need is a good pair of shoes. And you should go and get fitted at a running store to find out what shoes work for you, because the shoes that work for me, I can tell you that I love them, but you might put them on your feet and absolutely hate them. And a common way to get injured or just have a weird running form is wearing the wrong shoes. So you can go to your local running store and get fitted, and they will find ones that will work for you. And that was such a game changer, because I think I started out with some really crappy sneakers that were not meant for running. And then I put real running shoes on my feet and I was like, oh, this feels so much better. Don't go out and buy a ton of things. You don't need to be buying a vest and fuel and all of these things just to get you started on a build your mileage kind of plan. So I was training for the 5K, and like I said, a 5K is a very doable goal to train for your very first, but at the time it did feel hard and it felt long. And I started kind of having this mindset shift every single time, like I said, of wait, I just finished 20 minutes of running nonstop. I can do this. And it was scary every single time I would get on the treadmill or go outside. It was scary, but you kind of feel, one of my favorite quotes is feel the fear and do it anyway. And you kind of just feel it. And then you're like, I'm gonna do it, because yesterday or the day before, I was able to do 20 minutes without stopping. So today I'm sure I could do 22 minutes without stopping. You kind of build up in a way, and it does feel hard and long, but you also need to, tip number 4, slow down and stop worrying about your heart rate or paces. Comparison is the thief of joy. I was slowing down to the point of basically walking for a lot of my first runs, and that was what did it for me. Because if you go out too hard or too fast on every single run, you're not only going to probably get injured, but you're going to be wondering, this sucks so bad, why am I doing this? But once you find your groove of a jog that feels conversational and enjoyable and doable, it becomes so fun, and you can go for so much longer. And you'll probably see a lot of things about heart rate data and that your heart rate should be below XYZ rate on this easy run. Do not get caught up in all of that, because at the end of the day, if you have done basically no cardio up until this point, which is where I wasn't doing any cardio, my heart rate was through the roof on most of these training runs because my body had no idea what it was doing. 4 years later, my heart rate is something that I actually look at and value for data and insights about where I'm at. But when I was first starting, I didn't even look. There was no point, because it was going to be at 190 beats per minute on an easy run, because my body was like, what is happening here? So don't worry, and don't be comparing your heart rate to an elite runner on the internet that is 20 years into your running career. Stay in your own lane and run your own race, do your own training, and it will be a lot easier to not get in your head about it. So the 5K got canceled due to the pandemic, but I was like, I want to run this anyway. So I went out in my backyard and I ran this race, and that was such a huge confidence booster to then continue my running journey, because I went out there and I finished the 5K, and I was so proud of myself, and I just had this yes you can attitude. And after that, I was just enjoying running as movement, and I didn't immediately sign up for another race, obviously because it was COVID. I didn't even know when there was going to be another race or if there would be an opportunity to do so. So I was kind of just running for movement. I love the Peloton app, and I was just kind of enjoying it. And then I decided later on to then sign up for a half marathon. I was also only following people that really inspired me on the internet. I know there's so many running creators out there, but it's okay to unfollow or not follow ones that you just don't feel aligned to, but try to find people that are relatable and are kind of meeting you where you are. And if they're not relatable in terms of they're so much faster than you, they can at least relate to you on an emotional level and you feel connected to them. So I was really trying to prioritize following people that I was actually inspired by and weren't putting me down, because at the end of the day, I wasn't training for anything. And I was like, am I still a runner even if I'm not training for anything? And that is tip number 5. You don't have to be training for any race, and the marathon is not the only distance. I think a lot of people see the marathon as this huge thing, which absolutely is, but it is not the only race that people run, and it's not the only way you can start running. I think a lot of people sign up for a marathon and start their running journey. I think you should start your running journey, find out if you like running, and then maybe sign up for a marathon later. I'm not gonna tell you which way to go about it, but to me, diving right into the marathon can be tricky because you might end up hating it, resenting the sport, and never running again. And I think if you build up more consistently before choosing a race, that's a great way to do it. And you're absolutely still a runner, regardless of if you are signed up for a race or not. So I signed up for my half marathon, my first one, and I was training through the middle of winter in Oregon, and training became very mundane. I once again found a PDF plan that I really enjoyed. It was doable for me, and it was meeting me where I was at as I was in my running journey at this point. And I was probably running consistently like 4 days a week, and it was all on the treadmill, which brings me to tip number 6. Treadmill miles still count. For the first probably couple months when I was on the treadmill, I was like, well, I did 4 miles today, but it was on the treadmill, so I don't know if it's like real running. It's absolutely real running. And the great thing about the treadmill is you don't have variables such as Oregon snowy winters, and you can also control your pace a little bit better. I've heard that if you have your treadmill on a 1% incline to kind of mimic outside, it can help. But at the end of the day, treadmill miles absolutely still count. And I found with the Peloton app, having those runs kept me so engaged and not bored on the treadmill because every run was different. Found fun music to run to, or a podcast or Netflix. Find something that entertains you and makes it enjoyable, and it will be so much better. So that's kind of tip number 6. And then tip number 7 is find a way to enjoy it. And if you're like, oh God, this is hell, find something to switch it up. Maybe change your pace halfway through your run, or do intervals, or find an app that helps. Like, you have to make it enjoyable, kind of going back to the beginning of like, don't force it. If you're not having fun, take a step back and reflect. So I was training for my first half marathon, and again, I was on the treadmill a lot, and training becomes really difficult, especially when you're increasing distance to distances that you've never even touched before. When I finished the 5K, I was like, that was doable and I could do that again. But 13 miles felt absolutely nuts. So when I'm looking at my training calendar and it says that I have a 9-mile run on a casual Saturday, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Bringing me to tip number 8. This is kind of a lot, but it is positive self-talk is going to be the game changer, as well as running for time instead of distance would sometimes help me. Positive self-talk, I actually learned a lot through the Peloton app. I found that those instructors were saying things that were really relatable to me, and those that mantras that I could kind of apply to my own running journey and my own life in and outside of running. And I was able to speak to myself in a way of like, I did this 5K. Yes, you can. You got this. And you really start to get into the routine of talking to yourself in a positive way. It's one of the ways that running has completely changed my life in terms of the way that I speak to myself, because you have these little wins that build up over time and you realize what you can accomplish, and it just like bleeds into the rest of you. And so I take that with me outside of running as well. But also, when in doubt, run for time, meaning if I had a 9-mile run, I wouldn't say I had 9 miles. I would kind of figure out in my head how long I thought it was going to take me to run that, give or take. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to run for 90 minutes. I'm just throwing out a number. And for some reason, sometimes running for time just helps. Like if you have a 3-mile run, just tell yourself, I'm just going to go out for 30 minutes today. And having that kind of time mindset shift was really helpful for me just getting started, especially as you start to increase the distance and not worry so much about the exact mile. My foot is asleep. Going along with training getting really difficult, I realized that I needed to fuel, and I'm going to make an entirely separate video on this topic and what I have learned about nutrition since starting my running journey. If I could just like shout one thing from the rooftops, especially if you're training for a longer distance, such as a half marathon or a marathon, please eat and fuel correctly, because that is not something that I did for my first half. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just starting to find out about how I could fuel and eat on a run, and I didn't think I needed to. If I could just go back and shake my younger self and be like, please fuel yourself while you're running and afterwards correctly, I would. So like I said, you don't have to go out and buy a ton of things, but you should, if you're training for like a half marathon, test out gels, test out different ways for fueling, and just make sure that you're eating enough. I'm gonna do a whole separate video, and I have a lot on my TikTok and Instagram about this, but just find the fuel that works for you and make sure that you are nourishing your body at all times. You should not be constantly hungry. Because you will be, but you need to eat to then replenish that hunger. Okay, so kind of jumping ahead here and getting into my last number 10 tip. Once I completed 2 half marathons, I learned a lot in that. I then moved to New York City, and prior to moving, I had never run with a group before. I was doing all solo runs, and I would see people out on a group run either on the internet or in my hometown, and I was like, what are you guys doing? How are you talking on a run? That kind of sounds miserable. What's going on here? And then I went to my first group run in New York, and it has tenfold changed the way that I think about running and my entire journey, and has pushed me to sign up for so many things that I wouldn't have done, accomplish so many distances, and just the community is so special. Tip number 10 is, if it interests you, try out a group run. I find that you can run slower on purpose, which is actually really beneficial to your training. You will find friends, you will push yourself to limits that you didn't even think were possible on your own. And like at the end of the day, you shouldn't be going out solo and gassing it on every single run, which is what I was doing, because I didn't understand the concept of easy versus hard runs, which is a whole separate topic. But if it interests you at all, I would recommend trying group running. I think it's such an amazing way to build community, learn more about running as you go. Like, I've met so many runners that have been running for their entire lives, and because I'm fairly new, 4 years sounds like a lot to some people, but 4 years in the grand scheme of the running community is like nothing. So I'm constantly learning new things, and I would just say check out a group run. I can do a whole video on run club culture. I was just on the Dare to Self-Care podcast with Jen Lauren, and we talked all things run club culture. I will link the episode down below, but I think it is an incredible way to make friends. And that's what kickstarted my running journey into running hopefully a marathon. I have tried once to run a marathon. I ran all through last summer to try and run New York City and had to pull out for an injury, which is why I'm able to kind of reflect on this journey. And I'm going to be making a whole separate video on what I learned through injury and what I'm going to be doing differently for my marathon training. But I just love the sport so much, and it's given me so much, that I just want to be able to share all of my thoughts from a beginner's perspective, because right now I'm coming off an injury and I feel like a beginner again, and it is so fun to look back, and I'm taking these tips for myself. So if you have any other questions or comments about starting a running journey, leave them down below, or let me know what kind of content you want to see here, and I will make a video on it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram if you want to follow me over there, and I will see you very soon.